You got the touch.
Transformers.
You got the power.
What is up, Flick fans, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are ranking all 7 Transformers movie, including the Michael Bay films, the brand new Bumblebee movie, and the 1986 The Transformers, the movie. This is in many ways a predictable list, but the beginning will hold some surprises, and in some ways you guys might disagree with me, but that's the beauty of doing a list on YouTube. I'm so excited to talk about this because Transformers, the property, is something that I love. I love the concept, don't necessarily love the execution of the last few years, but we will get into all of that once I get into my list. I have a busy next few weeks. I'm working on my 2018 movies ranked list. I'm ranking every superhero movie I've seen this year. This weekend, I will be doing my top 10 best and worst Netflix movies, a lot of stuff to cover, and then Wednesday is Mary Poppins, but right now we are talking all Transformers movies.
And I'm going to rank them, starting with number 7.
And at number 7, the movie that I had a physical reaction to in the theater, and that is the culmination of everything that Michael Bay has done wrong with this franchise. He's done a few things right, but overall, he really let me down with this film. And the reason that I say that is because I actually really loved the trailers for this movie, and I said in my head going in, I said, even though this is Michael Bay, and he's let me down many times before, this trailer looked cool, the concept looked great, you have Anthony Hopkins, how could you possibly ruin this? And Transformers The Last Night really, hopefully, was the last time that I ever have to watch this franchise directed by Michael Bay, because he just took it in all the wrong directions. And I'm not saying that I don't like the guy as a director. I really like some of his films when you're talking about movies like The Rock and even Bad Boys. Michael Bay has done good stuff before, so why in the world is Transformers the one thing that he wants to botch? I'll never understand the decisions that he makes in this film, the horrible humor. It takes it to a whole new level, and just the choppiness of this film is my major issue. It has the same issues that his prior films have had. Of course, it takes him to a whole new level, but the way that this film was edited together, there is so much going on in this movie, so much that doesn't make sense, so much dialogue that is absolutely awful, and at the end of the day, with so much going on screen, you would think I could remember some elements of this film, right? It might be where I walked out of the theater and I just tried to block it all out of my head. I said, I never want to think about that film again because it was just so much of a mess. And sure, some of the CGI was really good, and some of the action scenes, they would have been entertaining if I could tell what was going on the screen. And yes, that 2 minutes with Optimus Prime turning evil, that was all fun and dandy, but then it all gets fixed, it all gets corrected, and the movie continues to go down the really deep, dark pit, the ugly hole that it had been going down the entire movie, guys. Transformers The Last Night was a debauchery on every level possible, in my opinion. And sure, some of you guys may love it, but for me, I think it is definitively, not definitively, there are other arguable options, but this one for me is the worst in the franchise. And this one for me is not very far behind it. I actually had this one tied with the prior movie that I just talked about, but Age of Extinction is also really bad. The only reason I have it a level higher is because the surprise element of the Dinobots and how much fun that actually added to this story towards the end. The story itself, it wasn't fun. It was like I said for the last movie, really bad dialogue, horrible characters, all of the underage stuff going on. That entire plot point was just kind of gross, and I really like those two actors, and I really like Mark Wahlberg. Hey Marky Mark, how you doing? I like you sometimes. Why do you always pick bad movies? Say hi to your mother for me. Don't get me wrong, sometimes he chooses great films, but this was not the movie to choose, man. If you want to be in a major blockbuster, pick a DC movie, pick a Marvel movie, pick anything but the Michael Bay Transformers, because it did nothing but hurt your career. Sure, box office wise, I bet you're a huge star in China right now. That's all fine and dandy, but you are just so underserved in this movie. The dialogue that you were given, the horrible characters, the disappointing elements, the really close-up action that you can barely tell what's going on. The way that Michael Bay films this is just so bad. So many elements of just racism within the robots and horrible character interactions. I could go on all day. But this is one of those movies that I saw potential and I'm like, this could be the one to turn around. I'm going to keep saying this. This could be the one to turn around the franchise. and Age of Extinction did not do it. It only made things worse, and the two Mark Wahlberg-led movies are the two worst movies, in my opinion, of this franchise, and I will never, ever watch them again. Alright, let's get into another. I'm sorry, guys. I know it's bad right now. We will continue to get better, and the farther we get on this list, the more happy I will become. But we're still not happy. Revenge of the Fallen is the next movie on this list. We are still with our old characters, the ones that we grew to kind of love in the first movie, and then they are taken into this film, and everything that worked about the first movie is kind of stripped away. The story becomes way more convoluted. You get all of these other characters that don't matter. The really weird death scene towards the end where he goes to Autobot heaven. Just a lot of things that are like, why was that written in the script? Why is this a part of this movie? I will never understand some of the decisions that Michael Bay made. It felt like he found some elements of the first film. He's like, okay, we can redo this, or we can go a completely different direction and just throw everything in that the fans want to see. You want to kill Optimus Prime? Yeah, let's kill Optimus Prime. You want more Transformers action? Yeah, let's get that camera in there, get as close up as we possibly can so you can't tell what's going on. I know some people like Revenge of the Fallen. Some people like all three of the Shia LaBeouf films, and that's fine. Listen, I grew up with the... I sound like Chris Tuckman. I grew up with these films. I grew up with the Shia LaBeouf-led Transformers. This is 2009. I was 14 years old when this came out, and I really enjoyed it when I first saw it in the theaters. But then I got older, and I started to dissect the film a little bit more. I started to get more into movies, and I realized that this is bad dialogue. This is horribly filmed action. It's not very well paced. The movie just feels so long, and at the end of the day, Revenge of the Fallen was one of those sequels that did not capitalize on the first movie whatsoever, and it took all of the potential that it had, and it just felt very underwhelming, very disappointing. Better elements than the prior two movies, and more interesting characters, and I don't actually mind Shia LaBeouf in this movie, even though he screams a lot, but still, Revenge of the Fallen could have been so much better. Next up on this list is Transformers, the movie from 1986. This thing is so 80s, so of its time. Listen, I'll be honest with you guys. I did not grow up with this movie. I just saw it for the first time more recently, and when I saw it, I did not have that lens of nostalgia that a lot of people have for this film, and I'm not saying it's bad. It is an utterly entertaining movie, and it has that 80s soundtrack. It has that 80s style. It moves so fast. It's so fast-paced, and there's so many things happening on screen at once. Look, some of it's an absolute blast. You get to see the Transformers be Transformers. You don't have to worry so much about the human storyline. There are a lot of things to like in this old 80s movie. I say old, I don't mean to be offensive. I know some people are watching this going, oh, he's a millennial and he doesn't understand. Look, I understand that. I just think it's a movie that is so of its time. It's really hard to watch it without that lens of, I don't know if this necessarily holds up as well as a lot of people say, especially people that grew up with it and have that nostalgia for it. But I can say the same thing about Star Wars. Some people have told me, Austin, the first Star Wars is not as good as you think. And I'm like, well, yeah, it is. But I'm also slightly biased because I grew up watching the first Star Wars as a kid over and over and over. Of course I'm going to have that love for it. And by the way, first Star Wars, New Hope, it does hold up. Don't argue me that. But really, guys, this movie is just such an interesting creature because it's not like I love it with everything in me. I enjoyed watching it. I see the flaws, the pacing issues, just a lot going on screen. Yes, it did something very incredible for the time. The death of Optimus Prime was big. It was a big time decision to make in what was to be a kid's movie at the time. Yeah, it's a decision that not a lot of kids' movies have made, so I applaud it for that. I applaud it for a lot of things that it did. Not necessarily my favorite, not one that I go back to, but still, for what it did, I had a good time with it. Transformers Dark of the Moon is an interesting beast because it's like Michael Bay saw Revenge of the Fallen. He said, you know what, I'm just going to let up on some of the elements that people like. We're still going to do some things that bother a lot of people, but I'm just going to let up just enough to where you can get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and I'm going to add a really entertaining third act and a battle scene in Chicago with a soundtrack that is incredible. Look, I've never had a problem with the Linkin Park soundtrack. I'm a big Linkin Park guy. Maybe I'm a bit biased, and maybe a lot of people look at me and say, Austin, you are insane. That music does not belong with the Transformers. But once again, you look at the nostalgia factor, and these are movies I grew up with, even though I do not like the second one. And yeah, I will say that it worked way better in the third movie. Some of the things that bothered me about the second one, they didn't return in the third. The characters are a bit more interesting. The plot is a bit more intricate. You have Leonard Nimoy coming in as an incredible voice of one of the villains, and it's just a lot goes well in this film, and I don't know what it is. I don't know why Michael Bay decided to make the third one, not the second or the fourth or the fifth, the third one, better than those three. And I'm not saying this good. I would say, honestly, this qualifies as a guilty pleasure because the mistakes are there. The plot isn't as fleshed out as you would like it to be. Some of the dialogue is meh. Some of the character decisions are also meh. But this one feels more cohesive to me. The pacing is better. I don't know why, but Dark of the Moon may be one of those movies, and you might be watching this and saying, what is wrong with this guy? He didn't like these other films that much, and he likes this. I know, it's weird, but go back and rewatch Dark of the Moon. It holds up way better than some of these other films. And now we are to the first Transformers movie. That's right, that is number 2 on my list. A very definitive number 2, actually. I genuinely like this movie. I think Transformers got a lot right. Now, I know a lot of people, especially fans of the 80s cartoon and the old cartoons. And listen, I'm a fan of what these characters used to be. I love the old designs. I wish they would have brought a lot of those elements into this movie, but they didn't. They decided to go in another direction, and I was actually on board with that. I saw that Michael Bay was the director. I was young, but I was like, ooh, Michael Bay did this movie that I liked, and this movie that I liked. He could be good. That's what I sounded like when I was young. Not really. Well, you know, 2007, 12-year-old Austin walking in that theater, seeing the Transformers in live action for the very first time, the first time they transform, the first time they land on Earth, the soundtrack and the score in this film in particular, that music that is playing underneath when they are arriving to Earth and they are transforming for the very first time, like I just said, guys, it is incredible, and I was blown away by the scale and the epicness of that part of the film. I was also a big Shia LaBeouf fan at the time. I loved him in Holes. I loved him, what was that movie, Eagle Eye, that he when he's younger. I was just a big fan of his, so I really enjoyed seeing him on screen. And I just enjoyed a lot of the character dynamics, not necessarily him and Megan Fox, because they didn't have the best relationship. It was fine for the first movie, but that's not what got me into this first film. It was seeing those Transformers on screen for the first time, and even the action in the third act was handled a little better than it was later on in the franchise. Michael Bay crafted it a bit better. He kept the camera a little farther out, and even though it's still kind of confusing what's going on, I think his thought process was, okay, they're about to see the Transformers for the first time, so we need to allow the audience to see them in all of their glory, so we're going to take the camera a little farther back, we're going to give these epic shots and show these epic battles that I think have the scale necessary for a Transformers movie, and they keep the battle a little tighter than they do in the other films. Even the third movie, Dark of the Moon, the one that I like, there's just so much going on, and there's so many robots, you can't tell one from the other. It's like, okay, is that one Ironhide? Is that one Ratchet? I kind of just lost track, and that's not good because you're supposed to be with these characters and you're supposed to root for them. It's one thing that this movie actually got right. It got you attached to these individual characters. There were only 4 or 5, so we learned their names and we knew who each one of them were. When Jazz died, I knew it was Jazz. I associated his personality with his character because his character had personality. That's one thing that was left out of the sequels. It's one thing that the first one got right. I'm not saying this is a great movie because there are flaws in there, absolutely, but for me, it has that nostalgia factor, and I can go back and watch it and not get physically upset, so that's a positive. I don't like being a Debbie Downer. I don't like sitting here and railing on movies. Look, Michael Bay has done great things in his past. He will do great things in the future, and I'm excited to see what he does next, but I am so glad that he is gone from this franchise because it just felt like he was on the project for too long. He wore his welcome out. Now he's gone. Now we have Travis Knight. Now we have Bumblebee starring Haley Steinfeld and John Cena, even though I didn't see him in the movie. This is why I don't have friends. No, Bumblebee is genuinely the story that I've wanted to see with Transformers. I wish this would have been the first Transformers movie. I wish this would have launched the universe, but they had to learn from their mistakes. The other franchise was old, it was tired, it was worn out. It began to consistently make less money, and the Transformers movies, for a while, they felt like they were impenetrable. They were going to make all of the money in the world, no matter what the quality, no matter how good it was. This franchise is gold. They have hit the gold mine, and Bumblebee now brings that gold, but it also mixes in quality and a good script and really good direction by Travis Knight. When he films action, he doesn't film it super close up. He doesn't make the characters looks confusing. He gives each of them their own personality. He even redesigned characters like Bumblebee slightly and Optimus Prime in a major way. Optimus Prime looks like Optimus Prime straight out of the 80s, and this movie is doing so well critically. I hope and pray it does well financially, because I want more films in this new established franchise. Because some of you will say, well, Austin, it's a prequel to the other movies. Yes, technically you are right, but it also changed some things. I don't want to say what those things were, but it made some decisions here. You're like, oh, I don't know if that necessarily ties into the first Transformers. Whoa. Are they doing a soft reboot? Are they doing what I hope they're doing and putting Travis Knight in charge of this universe? If they do that, I will be a happy man. Even if he decides to move on, I think they have a handle, a grip on what the fans like to see, just seeing the responses so far. And once this movie hits theaters, like legitimately hits theaters, I will eagerly await to see what the audience thinks. There are some things in here that I don't necessarily love, some minor issues with the script, and it's a little predictable. And yes, it's the typical boy and his dog, girl and her robot story. We've seen it before in movies like The Iron Giant and E.T., but it plays on all of those tropes so well. It's so creative, and I just had a blast from start to finish with this movie. It's so grounded. It's so much smaller than the other Transformers movies. Unless you're talking about when they showed the war on Cybertron. That 5 minutes of this movie is like my favorite 5 minutes of the year so far, blockbuster-wise. I wouldn't mind seeing a whole movie filmed like that. Wouldn't that be awesome? And that is the reason why Bumblebee is my #1 favorite Transformers movie. But the big thing here is it's not how I feel, and I'm not saying that I'm right. These movies were ranked on my enjoyment level. This wasn't factually the perfect list. I didn't rank them how good of a film they were. No, I ranked them from how much I liked them to how much I disliked them, and vice versa. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Leave your comments. This is your space to talk Transformers. If you haven't checked out my Bumblebee review, go check that out. And let me know if you want a spoiler review. I was debating it. I don't know if I'm going to do it yet, but that still might happen. This weekend, I am ranking all of the Netflix films I've seen this year, my top 10 best, my top 10 worst, and I'm working on my 2018 video, all of the movies I've seen this year, over 170. I am so excited to get into that. You guys are the absolute best.